Thanks for listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Do remember you can subscribe to Farmers Weekly magazine and get all the latest news, views and market prices by visiting fwi.co.uk.
First of all, we have to be very clear, we welcome this farm assurance review and we want to re-engage with farmers and make the audit system and the audit work better for farmers. We want to streamline standards, make the audits smarter, and we want to embrace technology. And where possible, when farmers are regularly compliant, we need to find ways to reward them by having possibly longer intervals between audits. So we have a lot of work already started, and we're very keen to pursue that direction of travel.
Can the red tractor be made better for farmers, and what will that involve? We speak to the Assurance Scheme's interim chairman, Alistair Mackintosh. Also in this episode, the government unveils long-awaited plans to reduce pesticide usage by 10% within 5 years. We look at the likely impact on your farm business and on food production, and how worried should we be after the first case of bird flu is confirmed in a sheep in Yorkshire.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Lots coming up in this episode, and we start with red tractor plans to introduce lighter touch farm assurance audits. The move follows a wide-ranging independent review and criticism from farmers that the scheme is too time-consuming, costly and onerous. Earlier, Hugh and I caught up with Philippa Wiltshire, Red Tractor Director of Operations and Interim Chairman Alistair Mackintosh, and we started by asking Alistair about the planned changes.
I think we need to focus on outcomes rather than trying to rush things through. But first of all, we have to be very clear, we welcome this farm assurance review and we want to re-engage with farmers and make the audit system and the audit work better for farmers. We want to streamline standards, make the audits smarter, and we want to embrace technology. And where possible, when farmers are regularly compliant, we need to find ways to reward them by having possibly longer intervals between audits. So we have a lot of work already started, and we're very keen to pursue that direction of travel.
So you have already started the reforms then, Alistair. That process is already underway.
We've started the journey. It's not something that can be done overnight, but certainly making the audit smarter and easier for farmers has got to be one of our main priorities. We've got to rebuild that trust with the farmers that, too many of them get anxious around the audit, and the easier that we can make that for the farmer, the better. We've got to, like I said before, embracing the technology, using the portal, finding ways to reward farmers for good compliance has got to be our starting point.
And part of that, Philippa, is listening to farmers, which is one of the things that you've been accused of not doing in the past.
I think one of the things that we've done is we're absolutely listening to our sector boards and changing perhaps the way we work with our sector boards over the last few months. And I think the influence that the sector boards and their feedback has had on our response is shown very much in our response. So that's about us collaborating and listening with the whole of our sector boards, including obviously the very, very importantly, the farmer representatives that sit on there.
One of the things that struck me in the Commission's review was the perception of farm assurance and the differentiation of perception, particularly between the devolves. Did it surprise you, Alistair, that there was very little concern around farm assurance with Welsh producers, but a lot of concern with English colleagues?
That does concern me because the way the Welsh system works is identical to the way our system works. Likewise, similarly in Scotland over the border, they all work in the same manner, and it clearly shows that our communication needs to be increased. We need to make sure that on our side of the borders, our English farmers have the right communication. We have to talk to them. We have to get out in front of them. We have to make sure that they understand and recognise how we deliver on the standards. And we have to engage better with the farmers when it comes to that delivery. Farmers have to be at the forefront of developing new standards. And I think with better communication, getting farmers more involved on the cliff face, if you like, and making sure that they're part of the decision-making process has to be a priority.
But you've had like technical advice, you have TACs, you've had technical advisory sector committees for 20 odd years. So how is it going to differ? What's going to be different now? And you've had farmers on those TACs for the last 20 years. So what do you need to change the people? Do you need to change the structure? Do you need to change the system?
To be honest, Hugh, we do have a significant number of farmers on these TACs and boards. And we've already made, over the last 9 months or so, we've already looked at the board structure and how we turn that board into a better communication device, more of a focus group type approach, so that everybody is involved in the conversation. There's nobody should feel left out. And we have to be very clear that representatives of trade associations and other organisations are very capable of, reporting back and making sure that the communication goes both ways. But a focus group type approach where everybody is involved in the discussion is absolutely vital.
Philippa Wiltshire, you're Director of Operations at Red Tractor. One of the catalysts for this review and the whole situation that we're in at the moment was the Greener Farms commitment, this idea that Red Tractor was going to ask farmers to carbon footprint their various enterprises and report that information back. There's nothing in your response to address that Greener Farms commitment criticism that infuriated so many farm assurance scheme members.
Well, I think we've already, over a year ago, the board already responded to the Greener Farm commitment situation. What we've done is we've learnt from that situation. We've listened more to our sector boards. They've had a real influence over this, and we're looking to the future about Red Tractor and farm assurance, and see this very much as a turning point for farm assurance. This isn't about looking backwards.
Do you think there needs to be more coordination between the assurance bodies?
We're absolutely committed to that. One of the key recommendations in the Farm Assurance Review was suggesting that farm assurance schemes, because of course Red Tractor isn't the only farm assurance scheme, and this review wasn't a review of simply just Red Tractor. We're totally committed to that. We already have good relationships with them. We've written to all the farm assurance schemes offering to collaborate. And we look forward to doing that.
And there'll be a progress report on that and where you are with that in that process in a few weeks in May. Is that right?
So we've absolutely committed to providing regular updates. Those regular updates will be done after every board meeting, which is every other month. The next one is in May. Those updates will be regular. We will also engage with David Llewellyn, who's been appointed by the sponsoring bodies to monitor progress from everybody that's been given an action. Red Tractor's obviously only one party, and we will engage with David Llewellyn as well to demonstrate how we're getting on.
One of the things that comes up and that's been mentioned in the review and in your response to the review is to better use technology and IT to make audit and information flow better. How do you envisage that happening, and how are we going to fund that? Because there's a bit of legwork to be done there, isn't there, to make it work better?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And one of the core strategic recommendations was around the use of technology and data. And those recommendations weren't just aimed at farm assurance schemes, they were aimed at the wider industry as well and other stakeholders. From a Red Tractor perspective, the Farm Assurance Review talks about the idea of tell us once. And from our perspective, we are committed to investing in our portal, both making sure that it works for farmers, but also works for assessors. Actually, next month, we will be announcing improvements that we've already made to the portal following farmer and assessor feedback. And we'll continue to improve that. But you're right, Hugh, there are wider cross-industry recommendations in the review around the role of technology, not just within Red Tractor, but across the whole industry. And that's where collaboration and, Red Tractor alone can't fix all of these things. We need to collaborate and work together to fix things.
And you talk about greater producer engagement, and I'm thinking particularly the sectors. I mean, some of the sectors are less cross with farm assurance than others, but where you've got quite a lot of pushback, for example, is within the arable sector. How do we fix the arable sector? Because as a red meat producer, I see my little red tractors on packs of meat that I might have produced, whereas those guys walk into the supermarket and because of the way the rule book is, they don't see the red tractors on the loaves of bread and things like that. How do you better engage and better sell the benefits of assurance to those producers who are really frustrated by it?
Yeah, no, we've heard loud and clear from the arable sector in particular their frustrations, and particularly their frustrations around import standards, and we have a lot of sympathy with that. And absolutely, we need to engage with that entire supply chain and the farmers in terms of what is the right approach. From an import equivalence perspective, we've already looked at developing a potential entry-level legal baseline standard. The farm assurance review and the arable sector, you're right, Hugh, is the only sector that was specifically called out in the farm assurance review. And they actually made a recommendation that AHDB leads that coordination of that to review the standards and coordinate with the supply chain around how that is delivered. From a Red Tractor perspective, we stand ready to collaborate and support if required in that piece of work. But we've also made a commitment within our response around revising standards and reviewing and looking at the standards as well.
Philippa Wiltshire and Alistair Mackintosh from Red Tractor, thank you very much. Louise, Hugh, you've heard what Philippa and Alistair have said. Do you think the leopard can change its spots?
I hope so. It needs to in the places that the report identifies. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of talking been done, and obviously all this effort and time that's gone into the review and the justifications, etc., etc. We actually just need some action and just to get on with it and make it happen, because it could be really good, farm assurance. I'm a big supporter of farm assurance. I always have been. I really value it. I can see how it's really useful when I go to factories and speak to factory owners and they say, yes, we want everyone to be farm assured. It make our life really easy. And actually all our markets do care, etc., etc. So, yeah, there's a heck of a lot to be done, though. And we really need to shift up the gears here, as opposed to just paying lip service and saying, oh, this is very good, and everyone just carry on as normal, which I have this horrible feeling that we're in danger of doing unless we really see some dynamic change at every level.
Well, let's come on to that. I mean, but just talking about action, I mean, you heard Alistair Mackintosh. He was saying that, they haven't just been waiting around doing nothing and then responding. They have actually already made some changes or embarked on some changes.
Yeah, they have, but it's like when they say, we need to better engage with farmers. And I get that. But as I said in the audio, we've had 25 years nearly of TACs and technical committees, and the system is there. And I have to be really brutal and say, are the right people involved in the system that it's giving us the outputs we want as an industry? And that's a really hard question, but I'm putting it out there because the framework's there, the idea's there, the standards are there. We can debate the standards, what's relevant, what's hot, what's not. That's a different thing. But in terms of delivery and how you get this, so everyone is happy, everyone's in the same boat, it's working for everyone, that needs some really hard work. It needs some investment in places as well, if we're talking about technology, and possibly investment in terms of people, if we need more people to actually help implement this and that sort of thing. So there's some big challenges still ahead.
I mean, more people, Hugh, or different people? I mean, can the organisation change without a change of personnel? Is I guess what I'm getting at. I'm not calling for heads to roll. I'm simply asking the question: is it possible that? I mean, there are so many changes that need to be done. Is it possible for an organisation to change that much without changing some of the people involved?
Look. There's a whole load of stuff to be done. How they happen to get there and achieve it, that's down to having their plan. But I think it's not just looking at Red Tractor. We talk about Red Tractor all the time, don't we? And as I asked in the questions, do we need more coordination across all farm assurance bodies? And that was something that the commissioner's reports picked up. And we've mentioned it before. In the old days, I'll give you an example. In the old days, if you were RSPCA assured for your beef and lamb, for example, then that effectively negated Red Tractor. Okay, so you didn't need to have a Red Tractor audit. And then for whatever reason, politics, people looking after their corners or whatever, that stopped happening, which is utter lunacy, because you would then still need to have an RSPCA audit. And if that factory where those cattle went happened to be selling, obviously for the RSPCA client, that's fine. But the other bits of the cow left over that might go into another marketplace would need to be Red Tractor assured. And because, do you see what I mean? They don't recognise you can't do it. So that's an example. And there'll be other sectors where that is equally as applicable. And so it's back to the whole thing. It's just a huge challenge. There's a load of stuff to do. We need some serious energy here and some serious impetus to make this happen. And it can happen, and it can deliver across all platforms, across all sectors, and actually we'll be better off for it as an industry on the other side. But some big challenges to get there.
Louise, the sector with arguably the biggest gripe with Red Tractor is the arable sector, in particular cereals. Growers are still not happy, particularly when it comes to having to jump through all these Red Tractor hoops and then see imports come into the country that do not meet those standards.
Well, I'm not sure how happy or unhappy they are, really. I mean, this has to be a step in the right direction, doesn't it? They have, of those 9 recommendations that were made to them, they've made 5 of them priorities. So that's good news. You could say, has their hand been forced? Well, it took them an awfully long time, didn't it, to acknowledge the grumblings and the frustrations. I mean, it really did. I mean, they'd been going on for years and years. So I think there is some positive stuff in there for cereal producers. And the last thing, as Hugh's just pointed out, the last thing that people want is to have to duplicate these audits and, do more than one for different customers and try and keep everybody happy. So they have really got a chance, I think, now to get this right. I hope it isn't too late. I was speaking to a fresh produce supplier the other day, and he pointed out that he does 15 audits in a year for different customers and different specifications and what have you. And again, as Hugh was just saying, he was saying we do really need this common platform now and this way of making that data accessible to our customers to save us all a lot of time and a lot of trouble. So, again, as Hugh said, I don't know how long this is going to take to get it right. I don't know what timescales have been put on it, but they're going to have to work very hard indeed.
And as we said in the audio, Hugh, no mention of the Greener Farms commitment that really lit the touch paper to this whole furore. This idea that Red Tractor was going to start asking farmers to carbon footprint their enterprises. No mention of that in the response.
Yeah, it was the cat that jumped out the bag, wasn't it? Yeah, and the reality is, and we've said it before, this stuff is all relevant and this stuff is chasing you down the line. And however you position yourself, and again, thinking in my sector, with the challenges we face in beef and people wanting more data about our Scope 3 liability and our emissions, we all need to get really good at footprinting our businesses because we need to, one, our customers are going to want to know what's going on. But actually, as a sector, just thinking specifically about beef, we have all these challenges coming at us about emissions, about doing this, about doing that. But actually, we have very little evidence. It's a very data poor area. So we need to get on and do that anyway, regardless of farm assurance, if you're going to fit into the environmental piece. Because on the legislative path we're on with net zero and everything else, as controversial as it may be, we have to make these reductions in our emissions, whether you're farm assured or not. Now, that's equally as applicable to all the other sectors as well. So this has not gone away. It will be there. It will have challenges that you have got to, step up to and peer over the emissions cliff in your business and see where you are. It's going to be back down to people, isn't it, Johann, as to how they deliver it. All the things that Louise talked about, the arable sector getting upset and cross. Well, why did they get into that position? And it's probably back down to communication. It's back down to, people talking to people, or in the case of that, people not talking to people, and then just people unveiling things and saying, oh, we need to do this. So it is, it's all part of the mix. It's going to happen. It's got to happen. Just get on with it. But do it in a way that everyone understands why they're doing it, and hopefully it will deliver some benefits to those businesses. Can I just say as well on the mindset thing, and I mentioned it in the questions, when you look at the Commissioner's report of the sectors that obviously were the crossest about farm assurance and having to do it, English arable producers were probably right up there at the top as the very cross ones. But if you look at red meat producers in Wales, there was just an absolute nanodot of discontent in the survey. And there was a good number of people responded from across the whole of the UK to the farmer end of the survey. There was more discontent within, say, red tractor English producers than there was in the Welsh red meat producers. And again, you ask, is that because the mindset of the farmers is different? Or are those organisations doing a better job at talking to their colleagues and talking up and down the supply chain?
Or is it indeed that Welsh red meat producers, Welsh lamb producers, Scotch beef producers are seeing an upside from farm assurance, be it Scotch beef or Welsh lamb, whereas English arable producers just simply aren't seeing anything other than red tape, bureaucracy and cost being piled onto their businesses and no sort of upside in terms of profitability?
Yeah, you're not wrong. But equally, there's a need for some form of assurance in that supply chain because all of the end users of the commodities are telling them that. But perhaps, again, it's just back to the communications thing, isn't it? We need to better understand the depth and the breadth and what goes on in the whole of the supply chain from the field right through to the end user, to the plate, effectively, in order to understand why we need to have those things in place. Now, to then get rewarded for it would be great as well. But it's just having a better understanding for everyone involved is a key to making this a success going forward.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
AgriVista's innovation range delivers cutting-edge bioscience products designed to optimise the performance of your crops, underpinning yield, quality and profit. Whether it's improving nutrient uptake and utilisation, maximising chlorophyll production or reducing plant stress, our solutions are backed by science, field trials and tangible yield-based results. With tailored products for every stage of your crop's development, we help you choose the right options at the right time, making a real impact on your farm. Find out more at agrivista.co.uk/innovation.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, the government's launched its long-awaited action plan to reduce UK pesticide usage by 10% over the next 5 years. The government believes this can be achieved by using tools like integrated pest management, a range of techniques for preventing, monitoring and responding to pesticide infestations in crops. This includes things like encouraging natural predators, mechanical weeding and using pest-resistant crop varieties. But will IPM work, and what impact will it have on farm businesses and food production? I spoke to Mark Ramsden, IPM consultant and head of arable entomology at ADAS.
IPM is a philosophy rather than a blueprint. So there's no single approach that's going to be something that works for every farm or even every field on a farm. And every farmer needs to discuss their approach and have an IPM plan set out that's agreed with their agronomist. And there are tools to develop IPM plans that really help identify the priorities and the approaches that are suitable for that farm. So when we think about whether IPM can have a specific impact on reducing pesticides, that's really going to depend on the individual farm, what their current use is, what their priorities are, and also what the pressures are over time. We can only really respond to the pressures season by season. So if we have a really heavy pest season, the need for pesticide is going to be greater. And so looking at these things in isolation is not going to really help us understand the benefits of IPM. It is something that has a contribution to longer-term farm practice and farm profitability.
Now, the government, Mark, is keen that more growers, more farmers use what's called IPM Net. This is a free resource, a free guide, as it were, to using IPM. Can you just explain how that works?
So the IPM Net is an open network that was originally set up to support farmers to benchmark the different IPM approaches that they're selecting in their fields and gives them an idea of what's been selected in the context of the wider network, but also understand any consequences of that on other aspects of their management. So we've been running a pilot IPM network for harvest 2024, and we've got an initial report that's available for people to look at, and there'll be some more detail coming through fairly soon on that work. And within the network, we're also looking at some specific hubs, and these hubs focus on particular elements of integrated pest management. So, for example, there's a BYDV hub that's focused on some of the work being carried out at the AHDB Strategic Farm East this year.
And this isn't just for farmers, it's for other people within the industry as well, yeah?
So the IPM network at the moment has a few hundred members across the UK, and that's quite a diverse range of different people. So that's farmers and advisors, but also there are consultants and researchers involved. And we're trying to use the network as a way of spreading information and supporting resources for IPM in the UK. As part of that, we have been running a weekly IPM Net bulletin series that has updates on different aspects of IPM that started in January this year, and we'll continue that through the season, alerting on any different pests that we've seen increasing through the season. We've also been promoting a video series that details specifically integrated disease management in cereals, and that's again another free resource that's available to help people understand the drivers of disease and management practices that can be applied.
The government, Mark, wants to reduce pesticide usage across the board by 10% over the next 5 years. Many farmers, many growers will be saying, look, pesticides are expensive. I don't use more than I need to in the first place.
We all share a vision of avoiding any pesticide wastage. No one wants to see pesticides going on when they weren't needed. It's not economic, it's not good for the environment, it's not good for the individuals applying them. So we all share that vision of really targeting pesticides to where and when they are really needed. That's good management in terms of the efficacy of preventing damaging outbreaks, but it also is important for resistance management long-term as well. So the fewer applications we can apply of whatever pesticide, the lower the pressure is on pesticide resistance developing.
Mark Ramsden, IPM consultant from ADAS, thank you very much. And we'll put a link to IPM Net on the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Louise, a 10% reduction in pesticide usage over the next 5 years. In all fairness, this has been a long time coming.
Yes, it absolutely has been. I mean, we've been expecting this, or we heard about this over 5 years ago. So we never really saw any more detail. So it's good now that we have actually got this plan. A 10% reduction by 2030. I actually think that's very achievable. I don't know how many people will be shouting at me when they hear me say that, but, that is a realistic target, I think. And what's of interest to me is that it's much, much lower than the one that the EU initially introduced, has since been withdrawn. But then they had a target of reducing pesticide use by 50% by 2030. So a much steeper climb for growers in the EU. And in fact, I did hear one of the French researchers talking about this at a conference I went to last year. And he was working with a network of 3,000 farms all across France, so growing different crops, doing different things. But across that whole group, they had managed an average reduction of 26%, which is good going. And I mean, he did say there's a lot of variation within that figure. But the best farms had actually reduced pesticide use by 40%. And the only other thing I think probably I should say about that was that there had been a little bit of a yield trade-off. So they were reporting slightly lower yields from that, but they were also reporting lower costs. So it was actually going quite well in France. And apparently it was also going very well in Italy. But the Germans were failing at it and hadn't managed to achieve anything like that level of reduction.
And that's interesting, isn't it, Louise? A big reduction in France, a big reduction in Italy, not such a big reduction in Germany. But is that because the Germans are so, famously efficient that they're not using lots of pesticide in the first place? And the other thing is, when we talk about a 10% reduction in 5 years in the UK, that is not a 10% reduction on every single farm. Some farms will already be using a lot less pesticide than other farms. It's a 10% reduction across the board. So not a 10% reduction for every farm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. And of course, it does also depend on what crops you are growing. And, there's been huge progress in horticulture and some of those crops, much greater and much faster than we've done perhaps in the broadacre crops. But, there are things to learn from everybody and every experience, I think. And as I said, in France, he did make the point that the overall figure hides a massive variation. He did actually divide it up by crop. Some of the specialist crops, and in France, of course, a lot of vineyards, but some of those specialist crops had achieved higher figures, which was interesting.
Hugh, your situation, I mean, could you reduce your pesticide usage? No farmer's going to be using more than they need to, are they?
No, I don't think. I think gone are the days of there was probably a period years ago, wasn't it, where you did what the agronomist told you every year, no questions asked, and they gave you a nice Christmas hamper. And, go back to the days of boots and ICI. And I can think when I was a kid, they just used to spray everything wall to wall. But no, now no one would because of the cost. First and foremost, they're obviously responsible farmers and custodians, but also the cost of it. And you wouldn't. But it's interesting listening to Louise talking about reductions and where the French are reduced massively, and I'm assuming that's across an arable platform. The one thing we do use sprays on here on my farm is we're growing maize. And I every year I'll say to the agronomist, is there anything new than using pendimethalin or dual gold or whatever we're using? And she'll go, no. So we carry on doing it, rightly or wrongly. We don't have any issues with weed resistance. We rotate the crop around. I'm always trying to cut, but there's only, if I don't use it, then it's a complete waste of time crop. And I justify it as well because I always try to get the best out of the crop I can to max the yield out. So the ground that I'm going to farm, I'm going to farm it efficiently. I'm going to get the maximum productivity out of it. And that allows me to do all the margin stuff around the edge and all the other green bits as well. But yeah, I wouldn't use more than I had to.
And the government's suggesting that integrated pest management, Louise, is the way forward. I mean, nothing new there either, but very much encouraging growers down that route.
Yeah, it's one of their sort of main objectives from this pesticide action plan. It's to encourage the uptake of IPM. So, on an arable situation, I think that it's probably used by most farmers most years. And this is about choosing, the more resistant varieties and choosing the right drilling date so that they're not susceptible to particular pests and diseases. It's about your cultivation strategy. It's about monitoring and using thresholds. And none of those things in isolation either. You work them all together. But yeah, it is one of the government's main things that they want to do, encourage uptake of IPM.
And with that in mind, little wonder that eyebrows have been raised at the timing of this action plan announcement, because it comes just 2 weeks after the closure of the sustainable farming incentive to new applications. And one of the options under the SFI was payments to farmers for doing exactly that, adopting IPM and not using pesticides.
Yeah, the SFI was actually doing that. So obviously, some farmers will still be getting some sort of income from following those practices if they've got an existing SFI agreement. But so the timing of it was a bit strange, really. You take away the SFI with one hand, and then on the other hand, they say, but here's our pesticides national action plan, and we want you to all use IPM. But there you go.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Discover Kubota's M7004 series, which celebrates a decade of exceptional innovation in Kubota's flagship tractor lineup. The new M7004 features a 6.1-litre, 4-cylinder Kubota engine with up to 175 horsepower and offers a choice of power shift or updated KVT transmission. It is equipped with advanced auto guidance, smart farming technologies and TIM, Kubota's tractor implement management for semi-autonomous operations. Key updates enhance operator convenience, including the ability to set cruise control speed without moving, an automatic assisted parking brake, and an improved K-monitor for expanded functionality. For more information about the new M7004 series, visit www.kubota.co.uk or contact your local Kubota dealer today.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm followed by your message to 88440. Louise, a mailbag full of messages this week, all about Hugh.
Yes, I have had some messages this week, and they're all in response to the item we did on the SFI last week, and we were trying to look at where we go from here with it, if you remember. And there was some discussion about imposing individual farm limits, financial limits on how much money you could get from the SFI. And Hugh seemed to strike a chord with some of them, or not strike a chord, should I say, because he mentioned how easy the SFI application process was. So my inbox then filled up with messages from people saying how lucky Hugh was because their experience had been very, very different. And so a particular shout out to David White. Thank you for getting in touch, David. He farms in Cambridgeshire. He did say that his rant was over when he'd finished his email to me, but he is still having difficulties getting his SFI application in. It was submitted, so let's keep our fingers crossed for David that it does get through the system. Another point made by him, actually, that a limit of £100 a hectare, let's say, that was a round figure that we used last week, just wouldn't be worth all the hassle that he's actually gone through trying to get this all sorted. So there you go. But I have to say, he wasn't the only one to tell me that the application process has not been straightforward. So, Hugh, I don't know if you sent yours in with a brown envelope or what you did, but you seem to be one of the few that
home-baked cake
found it easy.
No, I found it. I admit I wasn't doing it on thousands of acres. I was doing it on 280 odd acres. There was issues, as I said in the audio, there was issues with the land use codes. But once I managed to, and it did bounce back, it took 3 times to get various fields to stay on the same land use code. And they kept changing them back. So once I'd sorted that, to actually go in and click in my options, which is margins, £45 hectare for the non-insecticide use. What else did we put in there? SAM3, the soil options, all of that stuff, to actually go in and click the boxes on the screen so that the fields turn from whatever colour they go to green to whatever, actually was pretty damn easy. And then clicking that through and sending it, job done. Okay, and I did it all myself. Okay, and I compare that to when I did a mid-tier stewardship application myself back in 2017-18, which was quite frankly bonkers. It was like, write these maps on calf vellum on weird sheets of paper that aren't the size of anything that man knows. It was just utter ridiculousness. So in comparison to that, it was actually a lot easier. In fact, slightly easier because you click through on the screen. I found that easier than having to go back through on the BPS, where you go through and you have to check all the little numbers in the boxes and go back and do the land use changes and all that sort of stuff. So that was my experience. But I get not everyone had a similar one, and I get that for some people it has been an utter, I can't say it on the radio, but it's been that bad. I get that.
A little bit of good news this week. Chancellor Rachel Reeves leaving red diesel alone in her spring statement, despite all the rumours circulating the industry that she was going to put up duty on red diesel or even abolish red diesel altogether.
Yeah, there was no mention of anything to do with farming, I don't think, was there? So in some ways that's a good thing. Others might say, well, that's a bad thing. But yeah, one thing's for sure, there is some serious challenges there, and there's not much room for manoeuvre. And budgets and tax takes are all up for review, aren't they? Certainly, the budgets will be up for review with the public spending. Spending review thing that's coming up in the late spring. So we'll find out how much money DEFRA will have after March 26. In our particular instance with our sector, but equally everyone is now hedging on tax rises in the autumn if she's to cover the growth. Just hasn't happened, and it's not surprising why it hasn't happened, because basically the government's just depressed the hell out of the business community, period, and the investment community.
No news is good news, Louise.
Yeah, I think there was a huge sigh of relief, wasn't there, from UK agriculture. So let's hope that we now have a little bit of a period of stability, or some sort of stability comes to the sector, and people can just crack on with everything that they've got to do.
Yeah, lots to do at this time of year. Fieldwork certainly hotting up. Hugh, the markets, are they hotting up too? What's the latest on that beef price?
Well, we're still seeing advancement, a constant rising. It's bonkers. Finished steer deadweight average goes up again this week, 676.8, up from 665.2. The live weight also goes up to 383.7, up from 372 last week. Sheep prices, they also seem to be, they've just dropped back slightly, actually. 730.5 is the SQQ deadweight this week. The live weight price, though, has gone up by 5p, 345.3. Pig price, SPP, 204.4. That is up 0.2 of a penny, so that's pretty steady there. On to the arable markets, and that's not good news. It's all dropping back a bit, really. Feed wheat, 167.20, back, just under £3 from 170 last week. 184.20 is milling wheat. That's back from 191.10 last week. Barley also goes back about £1 to £153.10. Oilseed rape, that's actually stormed forward. It's gone from 389 up to 420.60 this week. Feed peas, 216.70. They stand on. And feed beans also stand on at £217.10. And the diesel price, pretty, it's marginally up by less than half a penny. 68.7 is the Wednesday morning ring round for a litre of red tractor diesel.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, the first case of bird flu to be confirmed in sheep has hit the headlines, discovered in a single ewe in Yorkshire. It's always a concern when a virus does jump species, but how worried exactly should we be? It's a question we asked Professor Mark Fielder, a medical microbiologist at Kingston University.
To be honest, I don't think, as far as the human population is concerned, it's that much of a concern. I think the important thing here is, although it has moved into another animal, there are specific circumstances into which the avian strain has moved into a non-avian species, but it hasn't moved on any further. So what we're looking at here is a virus that has, for reasons that are quite specific, been able to contact and come into and cause disease in one particular animal that isn't a bird. It hasn't actually spread that infection onward, and that's the important thing. And we've seen this with a number of animals in the infection process with high pathogenic avian influenza. We've seen it with foxes, with badgers, where it's gone into these animals, but it hasn't gone further. So I don't think there's any particular risk that we need to worry about at the moment, although we do need to keep an eye on it because it is an interesting development and it's something we need to look at in our ongoing understanding of how this virus is developing.
Well, bird flu, as we understand it, has been a relatively stable virus. Can we expect to see more mutations?
I think stability and influenza are almost non-equatable phrases, because the genome, the genetic material of influenza, any strain of influenza, is made up of ribonucleic acid rather than deoxyribonucleic acid. So that's RNA rather than DNA. And RNA genomes are always a little bit more mutable. They're prone to mutation, and it's no different with influenza. This particular strain hasn't mutated enormously, but it's nothing to say that it won't mutate going forward, and that's something, one of the reasons why the surveillance is being carried out by APHA and DEFRA, is to understand exactly what this virus is doing, because we don't want it to mutate and develop a trait that allows it to get into and be successful in other animal strains, and we want to be able to control it in the birds as well. So understanding its genome and understanding its mutability, its capability of mutating is obviously important.
Any developments on vaccine technology at all?
Yeah, the vaccine technology is moving forward. The vaccine we currently have is a vaccine that actually protects against the worst ravages of the disease, but doesn't actually stop the virus. So it's a bit like the COVID vaccine in a sense. It stops you getting bad infection, but doesn't necessarily stop the virus moving forward. And we've got that situation here, and that's one of the problems with the current avian influenza vaccine, is that it masks the disease and stops the disease being problematic, but the virus may still be in the patient, as it were, and therefore possibly move on, and that can allow, that shedding might be a problem in terms of allowing the virus to possibly mutate, because every time a virus replicates, it has the potential to mutate and then move on to other victims, either vaccinated or non-vaccinated, which means the virus can move around and potentially spread disease. That's problematic because we won't necessarily know where it's moving, because the patient that it is in is not symptomatic. So we can't see where it is, but we know that the virus is moving, and that's one of the reasons why there's not great movement on vaccination currently. But there is a lot of work looking at improving and developing vaccines which actually stop the virus in its tracks. So that's work ongoing and stuff to look forward to.
And you talk about surveillance. It is a notifiable disease. Is there anything that farmers should be doing in particular to try and keep on top of it?
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that we are observing our animals and making sure that we understand exactly what condition they're in. And I know farmers do that routinely, but making sure that our biosecurity is as good as it can be. I mean, one thing that's been highlighted with this particular case that we're talking about with the flu getting into a sheep is making sure we don't mix species as much as possible. So if you've got fowl or waterfowl, don't necessarily let them be in close proximity to other animals that you've got in your farm. So making sure your biosecurity is good, and taking note of any infection that does arise that's unusual or different in any of your animals, which, I think, farmers do that routinely anyway, but just making sure we do that, because the quicker that anything's noted, then the quicker we can actually make sure we prevent any infection moving forward.
Professor Mark Fielder from Kingston University, thank you for talking to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Hugh, the first time bird flu has been confirmed in sheep, a single animal in Yorkshire, the H5N1 virus adapting to another new host.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that if you put it under enough pressure to adapt, it will do. And as I understand it in this case, the sheep in question was living with ducks. There were ducks in its environment. And therefore, it's a bit like when we saw people contract the virus in I think it was in China. Then it turns out that the people in question, the chickens actually lived with the people in the same space. So when it's put under immense pressure like that, it will probably do that. I suppose the one good thing to come from this is that they found it, and the fact that the monitoring, the vast amount of resource that has been spent on monitoring and effectively, watching this in terms of how they're controlling the outbreaks on the farms. They're monitoring and swabbing all the farms. They're taking samples. They're watching very closely the genetic makeup of this virus to see if it does do any jumps or mutations. It shows that the system is working, and that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, bird flu, a very, very closely monitored virus. DEFRA keen to point out that there's no wider risk here, Louise, to the general livestock population.
Oh, yeah, it's being watched very closely. And of course, that's because it does have the potential to become something much more serious. But I think it's reassuring it doesn't spread easily to people, and the public health risk is very low. But in the meantime, they are keeping a really good track on it. We know, of course, that these housing measures are in place. I'm not sure what else could be done at this stage, what other biosecurity might or might not be needed. It was found in a sheep, but it has also been found in grey seals in Norfolk, I think, and also a fox up in Scotland. So, it is out there. They're watching it, they're monitoring it, and I think it's just really important that we all follow the advice as and when they change it.
It's unpredictable, though, isn't it? Because last season it wasn't as active as this season. It was fairly steady, and then it's really rumbled up this season with a lot more cases. It's a very unpredictable thing.
Unpredictable indeed, not an easy virus to deal with at all. Surveillance vital, so too is containment. And that is about it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and if you really like what you hear, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and comment on all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But until next week, when we look forward to joining you again, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening.